Welcome to our October meeting on technical trends, new developments in 4K and beyond cameras since IBC. My name is Bruce Fulmer. I'm the chair of the New York section, and I know you don't want to hear me talk. You want to hear the gentleman speaking about the subject matter for tonight. So I just have a few announcements really quick because we want to get on with the program. First of all, next week is our technical conference, the annual technical conference in LA. So coming back in November, we'll be making some reports. One of the big trends that's happening in the conference is an association with the Hollywood Post Alliance, HPA. And if you haven't heard the news, SMPTE is working on merging with HPA. One of the things that is expected to do is to give us more of a tutorial level strength in our educational program. That's something that Hollywood Post Alliance does pretty effectively for their viewership. So that's next week. We have two meetings in November. November 1st is a special site visit to Gravesend, the haunted hotel. This is a project by one of our student chapters here in New York. We have two active chapters right now. One is at BMCC, where we had last month's meeting. The other one that's active at the present time is at City Tech. So I'm going to ask Rioya Terrera to please just give a very brief introduction to what that site visit is about.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm Rioya Terrera from the New York City College of Technology, known as City Tech, the Department of Entertainment Technology. Every fall, we give Halloween-themed attraction, theme park, and it's a collaboration between the faculty and the students. And many of the students are the SMPTE chapter members, student members of our college. As of last week, the New York Time Out magazine listed us as one of the kids-friendliest haunted hotels in New York City, which is nice. Every fall, we have over 2,000 visitors to our theme park. It's kids-friendly, but also it's great for people who are techie. It's all show-controlled. It involves video, audio, lighting, props, scenery, and so on. We actually do have visitors from the industry, like Disney, Broadway theaters. It's because our networking system is ahead of the industry. The maintenance will be too much for the industry. That's why we're ahead. But our goal is to keep pushing the industry forward. And I hope you can come. And it will be on Saturday, November 1st. We're going to have a special talk for the SMPTE attendees at 2 p.m. So we recommend that you arrive at 1 p.m. and make sure to walk through the theme park before the tech talk. And thank you very much.
So you will get an email blast with an invite to that event. The fact that you've signed up for this event and registered with Eventbrite automatically puts you on our mailing list. So look for that. So that's November 1st. Coming on November 18th is our next content meeting on technology for television and film. It's called The Calibration Conundrum. That'll be produced by Bill Miller, and it is going to be at Columbia University. So it's about display calibration. Here we're talking about cameras. There we're going to be talking about displays. Also, John Furter, who's one of our New York regional governors, is going to give a report about the going-ons from the governor's meeting, which is this month. Finally, December 6th, there's another student-centered event at Kingsborough College, and John Acosta is here from Kingsborough. They've just applied for a student chapter membership, And so he is producing a student summit. I'll be speaking with, and Bill Miller also, to students about technology, trying to make SMPTE more relevant to the up-and-coming filmmakers of tomorrow. So John, can you come up and just give a really quick nutshell invite to that student summit?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm John Acosta from Kingsborough Community College. On December 6th, we're going to have this film networking summit. We're working with Ithaca College and also Rochester Institute of Technology, and hopefully one or two more upstate colleges. We're going to have a full-day event. It's largely made up of a student audience, but we would love to have SMPTE member presence there as well. I think that's it, and it'll be on the newsletter. Thank you.
Okay, so as you can see, these are efforts that I, as chair, am trying to spearhead. If you are interested in speaking to students and relating to the younger generation of filmmakers that are coming up, we need to reach out to grow the society for the next generation. So you don't have to be a board member to get involved. Anybody who's maybe wants to do a little visit to a college and talk to students about what you do in the industry as a professional is very much appreciated. So please ping me on that. I'm Bruce Fulmer, and you can reach me through the newsletter link that through the webmaster on the newsletter. You'll get all those links. So that's it for business. I want to turn the podium over to Mark Foreman, who's producer of this meeting, along with David Leitner.
I want to welcome everyone for coming. I really very much appreciate it, and SMPTE appreciates it very much. And also, I think a round of applause for the food for the manufacturers who helped supply it is due right now, so that'll be very good. I want to introduce David Leitner. Most people here know who he is, well-known filmmaker, written a number of books, has a number of films, of course. And he's going to talk about the various manufacturers and also what has occurred since IBC, Cynic, and also Photokina. So here's David Leitner.
When I think of New York and what it is to work and be a filmmaker, a cinematographer in New York, I think of the resources that make New York unique, like Adorama, B&H, and Able Cinetech. I mean, people come from all around the world, filmmakers and cinematographers and video people, just to come here to buy things. But we have it right here in our hands. It's amazing. No, I didn't think so. There it is. What I'm doing right now is I'm going to do a very quick introduction to the topic of the evening, then I'm going to get out of the way. We have three speakers tonight from Sony, Panasonic, and JVC Kenwood, and they're going to do most of the talking. As you know, the subject is the latest developments in motion picture camera technologies from IBC, Photokina, and is it Cynic or Kinect? Does anyone know? Cynic? Like in cynical? Okay. Or you could title it A Mere 5 Months After NAB. This is our version of the 24/7 news cycle. I mean, every time something's been introduced, it's time to begin to introduce something new. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, I don't know if you all know what IBC is, or Photokina, or Cynic. So I thought I'd just introduce you to these events. They all take place in Europe. They don't take place here, so naturally you might not have set foot in any of these events. If you are in Europe at that time, IBC in particular is like I shouldn't say a little NAB, it is NAB. It's just on Dutch soil. This year, IBC was September 11th through 16th. IBC stands for the International Broadcasting Convention, and actually it's industry run. It's a partnership between the IABM, the IEEE, IET, RTS, SCTE, and SMPTE. It's a conference and it's an exhibition as well. Started in 1967 in London. It's been held in Amsterdam since 1992. There are about 1,500 plus exhibitors that show up, and this year there were over 55,000 attendees from 170 countries. If you look at a pie chart of who attended, you know, at NAB, there you would see the pie chart representing people from, I don't know, 170 countries, but there'd be a lot of Americans. At IBC, if you looked at the same pie chart, we're just a little tiny slice. That's a good place to be. I like being around different people who are trying different approaches, bringing different technologies. Technology in this era is coming from all places in the world, which is, to me, very exciting. Now, Photokina, what's that? Photokina starts September 16th, the day that this one, IBC, ends, and goes to the 21st. It's the world's largest trade fair for the photographic industry. This is the 33rd edition, the one that was held in September. First one was in 1950. It's held every 2 years. And in Cologne, Germany, there are 752 exhibitors, about half as many as IBC. Another 300-plus companies send representatives. They have about 185,000 people attending from 160 companies. It's more geared towards the consumer photographic industry, but there you have it. CINIC happens on the tail end of Photokina. It happens from September 21st to 23rd this year, and it's the International Trade Fair for cine equipment and technology. It's the 10th year. It's held every 2 years, just like Photokina, and there were 164 exhibitors. And there's significance to the fact that it's in Munich, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Now, if you look at the map of September, you can see it's pretty jammed. I mean, I'd hate to be a manufacturer during those 2 weeks, because you're going to be pretty busy. You go from one to the next to the next. And geographically, you go from the Netherlands down to central Germany near the Ruhr down to Munich. So, you know, if you have 2 weeks to set aside and you want to make this trek and join the rest of the industry in their trek, it would be a fun thing to do. I call it a kind of a tribal trek because everybody is moving from one to the next for those weeks. Now, what was new at IBC, the International Broadcasting Convention? Well, a good place to find out what was new is to read Film and Digital Times. And this is a completely unsolicited endorsement on my part. John has no idea that I'm telling you this. But every year, John, you see it says double issue at the top, September 2014. Every year, John Fowler does this, in this case, 93-page issue of Film and Digital Times, and John is indefatigable in trying to include virtually everything he can that's going to be at IBC or going to be at CINIC or going to be, to a degree, at Photokina. When I can't go to these things, this is what I read. Look at all the topics on the right. It's pretty amazing. For instance, you would get to see, that's an Amira factory tour. So if you're reading this issue, there are several pages of shots of the Amira factory. I mean, how fresh is that? Here's another one. We're talking about film camera equipment today, but I think it's worthwhile to mention advances in audio because they kind of go hand in hand. So the Aton Digital Kantar, there's a third version that's out. It's the coolest looking thing with those purple knobs and this brand new user interface, graphical user interface. A lot of people have been waiting for that. You'll also read in Film and Digital Times about the Sony FS7. That's Juan Martinez. He's standing right over there. He's going to go into detail tonight about that. But you can see the kind of detail that's in John's magazine. If you want to know about the Aja Scion, if you want to know about, there's a new trend in anamorphic lenses, as some of you undoubtedly know. This is the Ingenue anamorphic zoom. These are master anamorphics from Zeiss. You can read about Cook's anamorphics, which have been cooking for a couple of years. Bad joke. This is a tour of the Romford Baker factory in the UK, and the reason I threw this in is because they're metal shavings. And, you know, we lose sight of the fact that this is an industry full of machinists and people that build optical devices. I love being around this sort of thing. So I threw that in for me. And there also is an article by yours truly on a camera system that I built that I've been using since May, based on an FS700, and you can get the recipe in this issue of Film and Digital Times. Now, when Mark Shubin, who everyone in this room knows, found out we were doing this topic, he started sending emails. And I just reproduced the emails so you can see what he had to say, because Mark is at the Met tonight. What is it, Figaro? I don't know what it is. There's an opera at the Met tonight, which Mark is tech directing. So he says, I'll be working at the Met during your meeting, and I wanted to be sure you had my input. on the most significant camera developments at IBC. And this is what he lists. He said the Hitachi SK-UHD 4000. It's a 4K camera using 2/3 inch sensors, but there are 4 of them. There are 2 greens, and the 2 greens are offset by a half pixel. That's where you get the 4K from. Then there's a red and a blue, and each one of those, it's kind of like a built-in 422 if you think about it, if you know what I'm talking about in terms of color sampling. And it can use all existing B4 mount zoom lenses with no loss, which can be kind of a big deal because in the industry that, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hold that thought for just a moment. I'm going to come back to B4 mount zoom lenses and why this is a big deal. But I'll leave you with this thought. All B4 mount zoom lenses are not the same quality. And now we're talking about a 4K camera, so that's a kind of interesting thought. The next thing that Mark says, I'm going to skip, is the Fraunhofer 15-lens light field camera. Do you guys know I think it's the Lito or Lito. Do you know what I'm talking about? Litro. You know what? So that's the consumer still camera that can take a picture, and then after the fact, you can change the focus point. Well, that's what a light field camera is. And now there's an Avid plugin that adds the ability to zoom and truck and post, etc. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. And Mark singles out the Ikegami HDK 97 ARRI with a Dolby Vision, what he calls perceptual quantization, but he's talking about a high dynamic range monitor. All right, and he's, cute but nothing special, Arri Alexa at the GV booth to show off a Miranda back. Now this is what Mark Shubin contributed. And then just to make sure that I actually mentioned this, he wrote me again, just wanted to make sure you got this. You are both, meaning myself and Mark, you are both single camera shooting guys. And while that's the core of the motion picture industry, it's not how live event programming gets to air. And he includes sports, concerts, opera, ballet, parades, inaugurations, everything except for what we do. I guess we don't shoot that stuff. Then he says, the issue of long-range zooms on 4K cameras is huge in the multi-camera field, and the Hitachi and Grass Valley approaches have therefore made quite a splash. Gearhouse ordered 50 of the Hitachi cameras. I said to hold that thought for a moment. What he's talking about is this. If you've seen any of those really long lenses, like Canon has, I think, like a 1,000-millimeter zoom lens, huge long lenses, they were built for the 2/3 inch format. If you're transitioning into 4K and you suddenly need those same zoom lengths and those same long focal zoom ranges and long focal lengths, what are you going to do? How are you going to try to get some lens that can cover like a Super 35 size sensor, but has the same zoom range as that 1,000 to 1 zoom? What is that zoom? Who's from Canon here? You know what I'm talking about? It's 1,000 times. No, it's more. It's much more. Am I wrong? What am I thinking? It's really it's a big box lens, but like you can zoom halfway across Manhattan with this thing and recognize somebody. It's an amazing lens. I've been trying to think of a use for it for years in a film. So exactly, shoot from the press box or shoot up into the press box and see people from a great distance. How do you replace that type of zoom lens if you're moving up to a full Super 35 size sensor? Because there isn't anything in that world. So that's why coming up with a 4K 2/3 inch lens, 2/3 inch sensor camera is such a big deal. So Mark is right to point this out, and myself and Mark Foreman, who are single camera shooting guys, might have skipped over this fact, and I want to thank Mark for that. Now, this is a picture of what he's talking about. This is the Hitachi SK-UHD 4000, ultra-high definition 4000 4K camera using 4 2/3 inch HD chips. Mark took these photos at IBC. And of significance, on the right, you can see that there's a label for Gearhouse Broadcast, who immediately ordered 50 of them because they can use their existing B4 lenses. Another photo from Mark, the Ikegami HDK 97 ARRI with the Dolby Vision PQ HDR. Essentially, it's an HDR monitor. This image will never do it justice, but it's a bright HDR monitor. The Fraunhofer 15-lens light field camera, what's significant, that was shown at NAB. I showed a picture of it when I gave my NAB report. But what we didn't know about was this Avid plugin. And for the life of me, I can't wrap my head around how that might work. So I guess you see in the viewing window over on the right, I guess you're moving the depth of field in and out. But you see, I come from the production side, and I know how to do that anyway. So I'm still a little skeptical about this concept. It's an interesting concept. Imagine what producers would do with this. As it stands, producers will take a 4K image and decide they want to go into it and move around and crop and reframe what you as a cinematographer have done. And now basically you're giving them the right to go in and change the depth of field too, change the focal plane. Interesting times we live in. So what was new at Photokina? Not a whole lot, I think, but there were two cameras that were kind of interesting. Canon released their 7D Mark II. The 7D is a classic camera. You could say there's a whole school of filmmaking that emanated from what this camera could do. It was an APS-C camera. It still is, and as you know, APS-C is essentially equivalent to Super 35. So it kept those angles of view that we're all used to, those of us who come out of 35mm motion pictures. But it adds dual pixel autofocus, which is a really big deal. It's not, Apple just came out with something called focus pixels. If you followed the iPhone 6, it's the same thing. Dual pixel is a technique of putting 2 pixels on each photo site and using something called phase detection, which I don't have time tonight really to explain, but you'll trust me on this. Phase detection is very fast. It knows where the focus is. It knows whether it's in front of or behind where the focus starts out being, and it can adjust really fast. It's not the old-fashioned contrast-based autofocus that we all know that hunts and pecks. It's something very different. It's in this camera. It's a great thing. I'm a big fan of it. ISO 100 to 16,000, 60p recording, dual SD and compact flash card slots, uncompressed output via HDMI. Not going to set the world on fire, but it's a really worthy upgrade to a really classic camera. Samsung surprised, maybe or maybe not, surprised people with this NX1. You don't really associate Samsung with cameras, but they want to change that. 28.2 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hybrid dual pixel contrast autofocus. They have the phase detection autofocus in this mixed with contrast, and they've got some sort of, both of them are working together. And that can be very effective too. That exists presently in the Canon C100 and C300 with the dual pixel upgrades from Canon. 4K at 24 frames per second, UA ultra high def at 30 frames, full HD at 1080, and that's 1080p 60. 4K in ultra high definition captured with H.265, if you know what I'm talking about. That's the successor to H.264, twice as efficient, it's rumored. This requires SDXC, UHS-1, and UHS-2 cards. And there's a new mount, Samsung NX lens mount, just what we've been wanting in the world, another lens mount. What's new at Cynic? I told you I was going to go through this fast. Look at that. The ARRI 65. It's 6560 by 3102 pixels. It's a CMOS sensor, larger than 5 perf, 65 millimeter. It has a new, larger XPL mount designed by ARRI with lens data system built in. They have to use Hasselblad medium format lenses. There's nothing else. And so they've rehoused a bunch of them. There's 8 primes and there's 1 zoom. It captures ARRI RAW, a 65 millimeter version of ARRI RAW to codecs, to the codecs recorder. It can also capture ProRes 4444 HD. That's good stuff. And it's only marginally larger than the standard Alexa. So we've all known that ARRI was harboring something, waiting to get into the 444 business. I'm sorry, the 4K business. And this is pretty spectacular. They've just announced this. This was announced at Cynic in Munich. And the reason that Munich is significant, I mentioned earlier, is because that's where ARRI lives, on Turkenstrasse in Munich. So, of course, they made their big splash in their own backyard. Now, I'm going to introduce our three speakers. They're going to drill down into greater detail into some of the technology that was introduced at these shows. We'll start off with Juan Martinez of Sony Electronics. He's going to speak about the F7, FS7. Craig Yanagi is going to speak about a mysterious thing, I think. I don't know. He's looking at me. Michael Bergeron is going to speak from Panasonic on their 4K, Vericam 4K. So, Juan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, I'm Juan Martinez, and tonight I want to talk about FS7. It's a cinema verite style camera. We've been led astray when Sony associated with Panavision, and then suddenly we thought that all electronic cinematography cameras were supposed to look like a Panaflex. So we're back on track. We've been trying to produce a camera that has similar type of operability as you would with an old Atom camera, the legendary cat on the shoulder. I'm not saying that we have achieved it, but we have given it we came pretty close, I think. And this is it. I'm going to talk about it. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to interrupt me. So we call this Cine Verite. It's our nickname for it as a camera that is used for that application for documentaries and long-form recording. It's essentially designed for long-form. It's suitable for all types of long-form productions, such as reality TV, magazine shows, and all kinds of unscripted television production, and as well as indie or other low-budget type of applications. The core technologies of the camera, if you look at the core technologies of the camera, it's a little bit confusing because it's based on the same platform as an F5 camera, but it has many differences with the F5 as well. So it has a 4K Super 35 millimeter XMOR sensor with 12 million pixels, 16-bit LED, ISO 2000 exposure index for 14 stops latitude, S-gamma 3, dot cine color gamut, S-log 3 gamma, onboard 4K and XAVC recording, magnesium frame, and another very interesting thing is it's environmentally sealed electronics and image sensor. And there's a separate cooling system in the camera. So what makes this camera different? Well, in first place, it is Sony quality. And it is truly optimized to be small and lightweight for long shooting sessions. It doesn't require a rig. We designed it so it can be operated without a rig. It has something we call a smart grip. So you can control the camera from your right hand. It has many of the essential controls on it. And is fully very flexible in its programming, so you can configure it for your own application. And it's made for long-form recording, so we have long-form type of compression as well on the camera. And it is very quiet. So this camera has 4 pillars that make the camera different. One of them is its handheld-centric ergonomics. And the other one is the alpha lens system, plus the XAVC-L codec and XQD memory cards. Those are the 4 things that make the camera very different. So no rig is needed. The camera body is only less than 4 pounds. It is built out of magnesium. So this has a magnesium chassis, and the exterior of the camera is magnesium. I stood on one just to make sure that it is very robust. So magnesium is 33% lighter than aluminum, but it has superior mechanical characteristics. It is impact resistant. It can achieve a structural strength with less material, and it has excellent dimensional stability. You don't want the camera to change shape or change the focus. And it's eco-friendly. The camera, as I mentioned before, the electronics and the image sensor are sealed from the environment to avoid contact with water or dust. And it has a heat pipes that bring the heat from the sensor and from the electronics out to a radiator, and it has active cooling. There is a service menu, a maintenance menu on the camera. If you invoke that, you can see that the actual readings of temperature for the image sensor and the circuits in the camera. If you look from the side of the camera, you can see the heat pipes and the radiator. We talked to an awful lot of people, many of you, when we were designing the shape of the camera. And many people told us that they wanted to have the cameras to be handheld, held on the shoulders. But many of the people who started with DSLRs prefer to hold the camera in front of them. So we designed the camera so it could be used for both type of applications. And here's a perfect example. You can see that the camera can be held in your lap, can be cradled, it's very small. There's no angles on it. There's bevel around the sides. And everything is very carefully designed to not bother the operator. It can be held from the top, it can be used on a tripod, and so on. So it has incredible flexibility. Of course, you know, the Atom cameras or the Super 16mm cameras, the optics were not very heavy. So very important thing for a design of this type is to take advantage of the excellent lenses that exist for DSLRs, such as Canon lenses or Nikon lenses, and of course Sony lenses. Sony bought out Konica Minolta about 6 years ago, and we have really now become a world-class lens manufacturer. And these lenses have very high optical performance. So these lenses have to be able to be used with the, let's say, the A7R camera that has 36 million pixels. So any kind of optical artifacts will be clearly revealed. These lenses are small and lightweight, and one of the nice things about E-mount is that they were designed for motion from the beginning. So it is possible to control them very, very nicely. Oh, keeping the camera small and without being cumbersome also includes not having a whole bunch of wires. So this is a Sony UWPD wireless receiver and a transmitter. And the receiver simply docks into a smart shoe we call an MI shoe. And this is getting powered by the camera, so when you turn the power on the camera, the receiver turns on automatically. You don't need the extra weight of the batteries on it. And it also sends the signals to either channel 1 or channel 2 via the MI shoe. So this is really a phenomenal development. It can be controlled and from the top as well. The camera has two SDI outputs and one HDMI, and the HDMI can output either 4096 by 2160 or 3840 by 2160 or HD at 422 10-bit. This is what the Smart Grip looks like. So it comes, the production camera, the sample that we have here, the arm is straight, but the production cameras, they come down at an angle. We found that this is more ergonomically and offers more stability for controlling the camera. And it has a number of controls. All of these are assignable. So there's a joystick. There's a mechanical release. Of course, this is not assignable. The grip rotates 360 degrees. And there are several buttons. So this one is originally assigned as a user menu. You can assign many different things. This is the expanded focus. There's a dial here on the front that is also assignable. This can be assigned to control the audio level or the ISO or the focus or the iris aperture. And there's another assignable control dial on the camera head. This is a view from the front. You can see there's one more button here, and you can more clearly see the dial on the front of the smart grip. This one is normally assigned for momentary iris operation, pretty much similar with the muscle memory of ENG lens. You want to operate it with your pinky. That's where we locate it. The focus expansion can be configured to expand either 8 times and 4 times, or go directly to any of your favorite sizes. There are many assignable functionalities. All of these things can be assigned to all these assignable buttons, which are both on the body of the camera and on the smart grip. And we don't have to sacrifice assignable buttons for peaking and zebra, because those have their own dedicated buttons on the viewfinder itself. And as I mentioned before, there are 2 dials on the camera, and either dial can be configured to use any of these. So the design, when we design this, we make sure that the buttons are very large, so we can operate it with gloves. And these are 3 assignable buttons on the front of the camera. And there's these other assignable dial, which is normally used for the iris, but that could be assigned for a different configuration. All the controls and all the cables face backwards, just like you saw the BNCs and the HDMI and the XLRs, everything facing backwards. And even the power switch is recessed, so there's nothing to snag while you're running and gunning with the camera. The alpha lens system is one of the core technologies in the camera. This was introduced originally with the little point-and-shoot NEX series cameras. These were relatively inexpensive cameras. And some lenses were produced for this mount as well at the time. And of course, these were all low cost. But since these have become used in the FS100 and FS700, and I have yet to see one of these fail. These are built out of stainless steel entirely, milled, very high tolerances. When you put a lens on it, you can feel it that it goes on very tight. And that's so the lens won't swim around when you touch it if you're focusing or changing the aperture or something, or zooming. And this system has a virtue of having very shallow flanges, only 18 millimeters. So it means that you can put virtually any lens on this camera. You can put even lenses that are made for rangefinder cameras, like Leica cameras, that don't have a mirror box, and with just a simple mechanical adapter. So if you have the right kind of bayonet on both sides, you can put virtually any lens on this camera and take advantage of it with any kind of optical degradation or any kind of artifacts. Sony, as I mentioned before, we bought out Konica and Minolta, and we inherited what is known as the A-mount. And the A-mount was designed for cameras that had a mirror box on them. And in the front, you see the lenses that are now designed for the new E-mount. And both of them are part of the alpha lens system. Currently, we have A-mount lenses, 32 in total, 20 for full frame, and 12 for APS-C, which of course will also cover Super 35. And there are 7 lenses currently, E-mount, full frame size, and 17 APS-C size, for a total of 22. It comes up to 56. And these are the 5 lenses and these other 2 lenses. So one of them is a 28 to 135 millimeter, which is on this camera. This lens is designed as a servo zoom lens, and it has a very, very nice performance and a very attractive price. It costs less than 1/10 of the cost of a Cabrio or the Canon 17 times lens. Of course, these are made to be lighter, and they have very good optical performance. I've shot some pretty spectacular stuff with them. And the other one is a Vario Tessar size, 16 to 35 millimeter, which is pretty good too. Both of these lenses have virtually no chromatic aberration. Adam tested these lenses, and he told me that he had to run the chromatic aberration test twice because he thought it made a mistake because there wasn't any. Very, very optically pure lenses, so a very nice performance. And at Photokina, we announced what these other lenses that we're introducing this year are. This is a 24 to 240 millimeter zoom, f3.5 to 6.3 with optical stabilization. One notable thing is that most of our lenses have optical stabilization. So not only does the iris, if I have the time, I'm going to show you a little bit of Catalyst Browse so you can see the metadata. And the metadata, the lens metadata is for the lens aperture is in hundreds of an f-stop. So you have f5.04 because we can infinitely open and close the iris. It doesn't move in discrete increments. So if you have to change the iris aperture while you're shooting, you're not going to see the stepping or hear the sound from the clicking. So these are pretty cool. There's a 28 millimeter f2.8, and this lens has the ability to connect with two adapters. One is an ultra-wide converter, and the other one is a fisheye converter. And these are high optical quality. They're made to be used with this particular lens. It's 28 millimeter f2. So the nodal point of the lens and everything is made for it, so it's a very good performance. And finally, two other really cool lenses. Distagon 35 millimeter f1.4, a fast lens, and a macro, 90 millimeter f2.8 macro. And then next year, we are planning to introduce another 5 lenses. And we hope to surprise you with some unique designs. So this is, currently Sony has 3 different surface zoom lenses. So this is the 28 by 135 millimeter. This is an 18 to 105 G. And this is the SLP 18 to 200 lens. And these 2 lenses are currently available, and this will start shipping in December. There's one more servo zoom lens, but it's a 16 to 55, but I'm not counting it here. This is what the 28 to 135 millimeter looks like. It has internal zooming and internal focusing, so it doesn't change size. It is silent and smooth. It has very, very positive control. And the design of the rings was fastidiously tested to have very good tactile differentiation and a perfect grip so you can manually operate it. And it has the same system that we introduced in some of the EX series lenses originally, where you can push this ring forward or back to have it in full manual with hard stops or in electronic focus control. The filter diameter is 95 millimeter, and it weighs only 3 pounds. So compared to one of the monster zooms out there, this is a lot easier to handle. This is the camera with the lens. This is the 18 to 105. This is also a very good zoom. It has also internal focusing and zoom. It is smooth and silent as well, and has very good control with the from the smart grip. The zoom rocker on the camera, you can control it. It has a circular aperture and high resolution and high contrast. And this is a frame of something shot with a lens. Probably it's not going to look very good with all the wash and the projector. So these are some images. This one is amazing. This is a 55 millimeter f1.8. It has a concave from element, And you virtually, I cannot make this lens flare even pointing at the sun. It is amazing. And it's very sharp, corner to corner. It's truly extraordinary lens. I love this lens. I have something I shot with it. I'm going to show it to you later. And it's not advancing.
5 minutes.
All right. Seems like the computer has crashed. Somebody told me once that Macs don't crash. Oh, that's what it was. I think it was probably there you go. So this is another lens that is really cool, the 10 to 18 millimeters. As I mentioned before, we have a 4K Super 35 sensor and Super 35 millimeter size. No, this is a progressive scan, same as F5. And we have several gammas. You know, not only you can have capture this beautiful image from these lenses, you have to be able to transfer this. And we have several logarithmic gamma solutions, and as well as hypergamma, 6 hypergammas, and 5 standard gammas. So you can capture your information. So this camera offers very high powerful electronic cinematography down to TV, ITU 709. It has a very wide gamut that can cover all the existing standards, 709 or P3 and so on, and 2020 even. And we have many monitor LUTs that can be applied to the camera. Apply to the viewfinder or the SDI out. And this is something I shot with a 55 f1.8. It's truly extraordinary. That's pixel per pixel shot at 4K. So we have several codecs in the camera, and important thing is that there's a XAVCS, which is used in cameras like the mirrorless cameras like the A7S. And then there's a professional codec which has had intra on the F5 and 55. And now the FS7 is also adding long op to it, which gives you longer record time and a better use of the media, more effective use of the media. And we have now also introduced 4K in long op as well. It's not updated here, but it's in the format. And these are the recording formats that can apply without the extension unit on the camera, both XAVC intra and long op in both 4K and in HD, as well as MPEG-2, legacy MPEG-2. So this is the same 50 megabit 422 standard that is used, but this is only 8 bits. So the 50 megabit is only 8 bit 422, so it cannot capture the full dynamic range of the camera. You can record with it, but if you try to do any kind of grading with it afterwards, you're going to have banding. So this is one of the reasons why we have moved to this 10-bit 422 codecs. And these are the recording formats that can be used with the extension unit. At RAW and 2K RAW or 4K RAW, as well as ProRes can be used with the extension unit. So the camera sends a raw signal to the extension unit. It gets encoded here and sent back to be recorded into the XQD media. It can do simultaneous recording. It can also do cache recording. It can do slow and quick, so it can do up to 120 frames per second in long op HD, XAVC long, and 180 frames per second in XAVC intra in the camera body. and of course at 4K up to 60 frames per second. It records to XQD media, and the XQD media uses some of the same technology. Oh my God, this looks like it's going to do the same thing again. All right. So it has very high transfer speeds. We use a special protocol, it's called EB Stream. So when you're using SD cards or media that is really made for storing your pictures on it, the camera has no communication, so it's just pushing the data out to the card, and it doesn't know if it's being recorded. In the case of S/S and also XQD, there's a constant communication, and the camera knows what is going on, and we avoid any kind of loss of frames and so on. And we've now introduced, this is locked up again. Huh. It's protesting. So anyway, this is like the last pillar. I want to maybe, before I disconnect from you guys, I want to maybe show you a little reel of something we shot, Mark Foreman and I, and it's graded by me. I'm not a great grader. So can you turn the light off? How come it's not in the screen? Can you see it on the board? Oh, it's on the other side. Hmm? So these are very challenging, a black building and a very reflecting building, high dynamic range scenes. This is shot at night from the Dumbo, from under the Manhattan Bridge. You can see the absence of noise, and if you look at the really dark parts of the scene, you can see a lot of detail into the blacks. We had a new version of Catalyst Browse, which what I use for grading, and I tested the same clips on the new version, and produced really beautiful results. So you can achieve very nice results. So if you have any questions, I'll answer them now if there's any time left.
This was introduced at IBC. Did you mention that?
This camera was also introduced at IBC, though Mr. Leiner did not give us credit for IBC. And yeah, and there's a Alpha 6000 that has a 4D focusing, which is the fastest focusing camera now. So, anyway, so thank you very much, and I'll just. Who's next? Craig Yanagi, I think. Craig.
Show what it looks like on your shoulder, Mark. Hey, Craig.
Audio? No. Good evening. So just a little bit about myself. So I cut my teeth in this industry during the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, working as a grip for Nippon Television. And I have to say that I've never seen Los Angeles that empty in my entire life, and I probably will not. I graduated from the University of San Diego in 1986, minor in English and Communications, graduated NYIT in 96 with a master's. In a prior life, I was an employee of Sony for nearly 20 years. I had held the position of a marketing manager for their analog professional products, also for DVCam, and was also the third-party liaison, which is a function that I carry on today for JVC Professional. Actually, my last gig as a marketing manager at Sony was to launch HDV. I've been with JVC Professional for 9 years. It'll be exactly 9 years at the end of this month, and currently responsible for the marketing and brand strategy of the professional line of products, including storage and display. So just a little bit about myself. Now, it's always exciting to talk about a new product, and it's always a challenge to talk about a product that you didn't expect to come out. But we were pleasantly surprised at IBC when the factory brought out a functioning, working prototype of the GY LS300. Now, in a prior life, the GY LS300 was called the GY LSX2 at NAB. So that gives you a hint of what we're going to be talking about today. So in the design concept of the product is we went to the marketplace and we, as good marketing researchers do for each company, we ask our customer base about what is it that you're looking for in a large imager camera. They've came back to us and says, well, we really like the bokeh effect. So, but with that, they were looking for a Super 35 imager. They're looking for flexible mounting options. So we had to look at different mounts. Long recording time. Well, we were looking at the media. We were extremely successful with the SD cards, SDXC and XDHC cards. So that's something that we took to heart. We were also requested that we put XLR connectors with phantom power directly accessible on the camera. Other outputs on the camera we've been asked for was HD SDI and also HDMI, and that we be able to use them simultaneously. And the final piece was ergonomics. We were asked for a handheld, handycam type of design. So looking at the bokeh effect, there's just, needless to say, there's a certain taste and a feel about Super 35 imagery, which you just can't get from smaller sensors. So our company took this to task, and actually 4 years ago, I believe, JVC Kenwood purchased Altasense, which is a sensor company out in California. And with that, they have worked towards creating a Super 35 imager, which we are very pleased to have with our new product that we're introducing. Next, we looked into the products of this stature and the kind of thought process as to what the photog would be looking for in this small handheld type of camera. So this is a dozen points that were made by a rather famous documentary cinematographer about a product that he really, really loved to shoot with. So a lot of the factors, I believe that a number of us have, or we've already heard about, discussed earlier in this evening, about long uninterrupted recording, about the holding of the camera, and this photographer had some very unique descriptions as to how he liked to hold the camera and cradle the camera and the types of shots that he was able to get. The size of the camera, the weight of the camera, the size and weight of the accessories, the fact that he can put the camera into a regular camera bag, very portable, and the shots were immediately viewable. Obviously, this person has shot with film in the past. This is the photog, and that's the camera. I had the honor and pleasure of working with Al Maisels when he shot Gates here in New York City, and I have to say it was one of my greatest memories in working with my prior company. But he really resonated a lot about what he was looking for and what were the key attributes of a product for him to shoot the way that he needed to shoot, to capture the images in the way that he needed to capture the images, and the way that he would be able to engage with his subject. So taking all of that into consideration, the factory took all the notes, all the feedback, and the end result is what we call the GY Ellis 300 Super 35 Imager camera. You guys in the back, you probably can't see the images, but don't worry. The pictures get bigger. So within this camera, we have our original Super 35 CMOS sensor, which was developed for JVC by Altasense. We've incorporated an MFT lens mount system, which we find it's universally supported. We're part of the consortium now. There's a number of lenses by Olympus, Panasonic. I'm just reading off the board here, but there's lots and lots and more lenses coming into the market, as well as adapters. We have the technology to implement variable scan areas on the imagers. And in the marketplace, there are multiple adapter options. So it really adds to the flexibility of the product. And the ergonomic handheld design will actually, we've been asked more than once, actually several times, and there's a number of people here that were in the same room when we were told that, or we were asked to produce an handheld handycam type of camera with the large imager, and we're very pleased to be able to produce that. So this is a side view. One of the things that you'll find is that it does have a built-in ND filter in the side of the body. The image capture capabilities of the camera, as far as what the factory can tell us or announce at this point, DCI 4K, that's 4096 by 2160 at 24p, 3840 by 2160 capture at 24, 25, and 30p, and also high definition up to 120p. We have 2 media slots for HD or SDXC cards for recording and backup. We also have HDMI and HDSDI output from the camera. Another attribute that we've implemented into the to the 300, and also we're looking to do in our future products, is the capability to stream directly from the camera. You can stream and also FTP files from the camera by connecting right here. This is a USB host connection. So say you have a Verizon Wi-Fi dongle. You'll be able to just connect that right into the camera, stream live out of the camera, or FTP files directly from the camera from on location. Another feature is that the camera will generate its own IP address. And with that, if you have wireless access capability anywhere in the world, you'll be able to connect to this camera, just type in the IP address. You'll be able to monitor what it's shooting, start, stop, zoom, focus, paint, and add metadata, all from a distance. From a battery power standpoint, we're going to be employing the same IDX batteries which we have with our current 600 series line of batteries. Currently, they come in two flavors. We have a 50 and a 75. The 75 is a long life battery for long time shooting. So this is a shot of the LS300 as it was shown at NAB, not NAB. Well, we had an NAB, but it was just a balsa cam. This was actually a working prototype. As you can see, we had image capture through a Canon lens, and we had a Metabones EF to MFT lens adapter that we were showing on site. So this is the kind of applications and flexibility that we will be bringing to the market, and we should be bringing this to U.S. shores sometime early next year, probably right before NAB. So with that, I have some information, not all information, but I'll open up the floor for any questions at this point in time. Go ahead.
What's the estimated price for it? No prices mentioned.
Come see me after the show and I'll mention it to them.
Greg, the software to control it via IP address, will you have an iOS version for an iPhone?
I'm glad you brought that up because it's platform agnostic. The camera generates its own web page. So regardless of what you have, if you have an IT device that can access a web page, you'll be able to control the camera. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Did I understand you to say that the streaming interface is USB, and if that's true, then do you intend to provide Ethernet interface in the future?
Right, you can get an Ethernet connector, like a Cat5 connector right now, and plug it into the camera and use communication that way, or I should say streaming that way. We actually demonstrate the camera in that configuration in our trade shows a lot, just because the Wi-Fi might not be great at the facility that we're demonstrating.
Okay, what's the line rate of the Ethernet interface?
The line rate?
Line rate, 1 gigabit, 10 gigabit?
I would say that it's let me see if I can answer that question in another way. So at 1920 by 1080, we can go 8.5, 2.5 megabits, H.264. We can stream 1280 by 720, 720 by 480, and also 480 by 270. The camera also records at 480 by 270 in .mov files. The cool thing about that is that you can take those files, put it into an iPad, and send off. You can edit You can view it, you can edit it, you can send it off on a small clip. It's really compact. It's kind of cool to
Is it a
cool to
global
do.
shutter or a,
No, it's not a global shutter.
do you have an ISO number or any kind of sensitivity?
Not yet. Not yet. Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that question. Any other questions?
Are you working with any third party on the streaming?
Are we working on any third party on streaming?
Any service provider or any?
Okay, so, thank you for bringing that up. What I can tell you, actually, RTMP, RTSP, Zixi, we've partnered with Zixi. Also, we'll have UDP and TCP. The other partner that we have that we announced at IBC was Wowza. The key technology, actually, that we will be bringing to the market with the 300 and subsequent products really is RTSP, or I should say RTMP, that'll really provide seamless, or I should say, connection to the internet with less speed bumps. So we're really excited about that. The cool thing about Wowza is that if you have an existing web page right now with your picture frame, you could connect directly to Wowza, and that'll pull the video directly onto your web page without any hiccups. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. By the way, outside there's a 4K OLED monitor being shown by Sony all the way in the corner. It's definitely worth a look before you walk out.
Okay, so this is an entirely Microsoft-free presentation. I actually no. Well, the PowerPoint. Well, for some reason the PowerPoint wouldn't transfer from my PC, so I have this on it's on just Adobe, so it keeps it simple. And as it turns out, this is in fact the IBC presentation for the VeriCam, which I didn't really even know what the title of the presentation of the session was, but that was the one I thought made the most sense, and as it turns out, I didn't even have to change the title. Okay, so, yep, on there. Oh, do I gotta? Okay. Anyhow, actually, we mentioned the 25th anniversary of Able Cinetech. Is it actually, like, anybody know what day the 25th anniversary is? It was last Saturday. Wow, okay. Because I'm figuring this out because I started working. I used to work at Ableton a long time ago. I was employee number 2, I think. But I started working there about the week I got back from my honeymoon, and so this means that I have to get ready because my 25th anniversary is my 25th wedding anniversary is coming up. So. It was a thank you for the reminder, guys. I got a little time.
You're reminding me that I met you there.
Oh yeah, well actually, there's a lot of things that's circling in here, and I'm going off topic here. Sorry, product manager in the back. But the picture of Al Mazel's up the last one during your presentation when he was talking about that camera that he loves so much. One of my first jobs here was to make extra large knobs for the ISO knob on Al Mazel's Aton camera. So it's really it's going to come full circle, because that thing was an Aton. It started out as an Aton camera, but it was a hot rod Aton camera. Although he never would buy a new one, as you remember. Anyhow, oh wait, get back in here. Okay. All right. So what we introduced at IBC in that we had a we had fully working models at IBC as opposed to smoke and mirror and balsa wood at NAB. And actually, if we go back a couple of years, entirely balsa wood at NAB when I was at our press conference and I held this large thing, and some of you might have seen it or seen it on YouTube or something. And we introduced, this was going to be the 4K Varicam. The next year, I came out and, backpedaling a little bit. I said, well, we're actually going to introduce a high-speed 2/3 inch HD Varicam that's going to go much higher speed at 1080 and all these other things. And everybody's like, but wait, didn't you say last year you were gonna make a 4K Varicam? And I just tried to look really sincere and say, no, we're really going to do both of those things. And but turns out I was telling the truth, thank goodness. And what was finally designed was not so much a camera, but a camera system. And we have them out there. And the idea is that we have the Varicam 35 and the Varicam High and the Varicam HS is the Varicam High Speed. They are two cameras, sort of, but they are one camera also, because this seam here is where the image block section removes and can be replaced. And viewfinders are the same, the recording is the same recording format, same processing for the most part. So that means that when I have the 35 block on the front, I can shoot 4K. And I can shoot 4K at up to 120 frames per second. Now, when I have the B4 HD or 2K, unless you want to be really strict about it, version, I can shoot HD. But I can shoot HD up to 240 frames a second. Because we had requests from customers. They said, I just want a Varicam that's 1080 that can go faster than the one you have. Because, talking about 16 millimeter again, if I wanted to shoot high speed and have a very long zoom lens, thank you for bringing that up, Mark Shubin, then I needed 16 millimeter form factor or B4 form factor. And so this was needed by a large segment of the market. And so, once again, if you're not a single camera guy, you understand this. But of course, this was something that everybody was crying for, and in fact, something the engineers were really dying to make. So you can see where the dividing lines are. And another thing that we had to do to make this work was get a higher speed P2 card, because while P2 cards are very fast, if you're shooting 4K at 120 frames a second, you're going to need a massive amount of data rate, or you're going to have to record to a cache. We didn't want to record to a cache. If you're going to record at 240 frames a second in HD, you're going to need a super fast card to record. If you're recording 240 frames, you can just do that until the card fills up, which is like about a half an hour of runtime. Or if you're NBA Entertainment, that's enough to get you through a quarter. So that was very important to them. Now, we talked about creating emotion, creating action. We have been talking to customers about this product for a long time, to the point where they were starting to think that we were never going to make it. And I was kind of starting to think maybe we were never going to make it too. But these conversations have been going on for a long time. We've been talking to the shooters as artists. We've been talking to the shooters as business people. Because, yes, a camera creates emotion. A camera creates action. It creates excitement. But most important, if I'm the owner-operator of a camera, really, at the end of the day, with some exceptions, is a camera creates money, creates return on investment. It creates billable hours. So one of the nice things about this is if you are a independent shooter, owner-operator, or you are a rental facility, I don't necessarily have to buy an entire camera for all the different kinds of shooting. This one will use my 2/3 lenses. This will use my 35 lenses. Okay, now what we've got in the Varicam 35, besides the modularity, and I should mention that also with that split between the cameras, we have a cable, so I can split the camera in two and put one end on a jib or in a helicopter mount or something like that. But with the 35, with the Varicam 35, I have dual recording. And this is something we've begun to do in the HD cameras, but when you're working in 4K, dual recording becomes extremely important because I may or may not be sending content to someone who's going to be able to look at it in 4K. I may or may not be doing the initial edit in 4K. I may or may not be able to edit in 4K. With this, I can record HD and I can record 4K at the same time. Not only that, if I'm going to do a log record, a raw record, something like that, well, let's call it a log record, I can also record HD color corrected, so that if I want to hand something to the editor, he's got something that looks good, and he has lookup tables for that. Besides that, I can save the I can save the CDL, the color decision list, in the metadata, so that when the big fat data files show up, somebody will be able to at least have a good idea where to go with them. And in fact, we also introduced the in-camera color grading so that you can create those LUTs on set and apply them to the output. So again, raw, unstepped on data in large files, color-corrected recording, color-corrected going to the monitor in exactly the same way. Okay, and then we get into some of the specifics here, where you have the dual recorder, the Express P2, Micro P2. The Micro P2 card, if you don't know, is it's the form factor of an SD card, but it's a higher speed and it's the size, and it in all other ways it works like a P2 card. In fact, it has the redundancy and the error checking and all, and the robustness of a P2 card. It's basically a RAID 5. But it looks like an SD card, and it will fit in an SD slot. Now, if you are using the low data rate files, now keep in mind, whether you're using the VariCam 35, and we very specifically called it the VariCam 35 and not the VariCam 4K, because we don't want to get into the idea that you're just going to use this for 4K. I mean, the 35 one will record 35 millimeter style lenses. If you would like to record that as 4K, if that's your production choice, then go right ahead. If you want to use 2K, if you want to use HD, then that's fine too. If you're using HD and you're using a low data rate, so you're using AVC Intra 50 or something like that, then you could just use Class 10 SD cards in there. And which is interesting. Once again, if you are an owner-operator, you are going to take this camera out on a lot of different jobs. You'd like to be able to use your cameras, your one camera, in as many places as possible. So if I'm shooting, if I'm doing working as a stringer for the NFL, I may put the 2/3 head on it. If I'm working on a feature or a commercial, I'll use 35. If I'm working on something on spec, then I'll be shooting at HD and recording on SD cards. Now, another thing that we're introducing, and some of these features, and I will try to point them out, will come with the second software build that'll be coming in like December or January. Correct if I'm wrong, but when the initial cameras will be shipping in a matter of weeks. But this is one of the features that's going to be coming later. In addition to having the ability to record AVC Ultra, which is the primary codec that we've been building on for a number of years now, which will include 4K. We'll also be able to record ProRes. So if you are already shooting a project, you're already 2 years into a long project and you're doing it in ProRes, you'd be able to just continue with that. And another one, speaking of projects that you may have a workflow already in place, if you're using codecs, if you're using uncompressed raw files recording to codecs, we are working in a partnership with codecs to have a add-on recorder in the back of the camera that will record the raw files as in the same way that, more or less the way the codecs is recording them now. So if you have a codecs workflow in your post-production house, again, you could switch cameras. You continue to do the workflow that you've been doing it. If there's a codecs vault in there, you're going to be okay. Now, actually, incidentally, if you're using the codecs, in some situations, you'd be able to have 3 different recording modes going at once. And here we go now with the main and sub and dual recorder. Still works when you're with the VariCam HS in SD. And keep in mind that in order to process 4K, and just to be clear, this imager is very similar to the imager that we have in our shoulder mount PX5000 camera, which you've been introducing for a while. That imager is actually capable of wider dynamic range and of running faster than 60 frames per second, but we need the kind of processing to process the high speed, up to 240 frames. Well, the back end here, which was created to deal with all the bits of 4K, actually does a very nice job of handling the very high speed HD as well. So when I'm in there, I also get the other processing features. So I can still have dual recording. When I'm shooting 240, I don't have to use a cache. And like the 35, it's a 14 stops of latitude. I didn't mention that, but was one of the things that always comes in is we'd like to have as much latitude as possible. We'd like to have as much dynamic range as possible. And another thing that we introduced as we built on the AVC Ultra recording is adding the 444 recording, which we didn't have before. So in 4K and in HD, you can record 444. When you are in the 444 mode, you get 12-bit. It's 444 12-bit. So with that kind of dynamic range, it is important to have the bit depth to support that. And the one rule of thumb is you want to have close to 1 bit per stop. And so, if you're getting 14 stops of dynamic range, you're going to need 12-bit. I mean, if we're in log recording, then that's going to cover the difference. And again, the in-camera color grading and the other cinematography features work in high speed. Now, we think about this in terms of stuff like NFL film shooting, but also things like Planet Earth, which is really one of the most well-known projects that was shot with the original 720p VariCam. They were always shooting the 60 frames, slowed down to 24 frames. You can do that and use the in-camera color grading, the log mode, or the film rec mode. Any of these things are available to you if you're shooting HD with the high-speed frame. So we expect that the same kind of people who were shooting with the 720p VariCam are going to be very happy with this camera with the HS, and in fact can continue to use their high-quality B4 lenses. So where we're looking at the key features that you will want to use the high speed for is, of course, the high speed for sports and overcrank, and the wide latitude and color grading for those types of applications. Now, 240 frames per second, and I know I'm standing here in the high-speed camera where you can get a high-speed camera from Vision Research, which can go much faster than this. But 240 frames gets you into some pretty good slow-mo. Even if, and keep in mind, of course, at 24, that's going to be a 10 times slowdown. But at 240, I can get a 4 times slowdown just for regular 60. Just for 60p, I get a 4 times slowdown. So even if I'm shooting for broadcast, I can still get a nice slowdown, or a super slowdown in 24. ProRes, of course, very important, and this was something that came up in the meetings we had with customers again and again. And this was a bit of a battle to get this through, because we're very proud of our codecs, and we still insist that that for the quality per data rate, the AVC Ultra is going to outperform ProRes, but we understand that the quality of the compression isn't necessarily the reason why you make decisions there. It's really about getting the job done and getting it done and keeping the post house happy. Okay, I'm not going to read you these points, but I will. In fact, I'm going to skip that. Okay. It's late, you know. I'm going to read that. All right, so another couple of things that I hadn't mentioned yet here is the high performance viewfinder, focus assist, and these are just kind of some of the operational features, and I'll just mention a little bit. The 12-bit I already touched on, and the raw recording, and the modular style. But let's just look at some of these a couple of these other things. So reliability, aluminum body. We use aluminum, we use magnesium, and we had a lot of discussions with end users about what this type of camera ought to use, and the decision here was aluminum. Pretty much every other camera we make is magnesium alloy, but we chose to go with aluminum for this center of gravity cooling system. We were able to you can machine aluminum. Magnesium, you tend to have to die cast it. It's harder to work with machining, and in this, for the way we were building this, it was the choice we wanted to use. With the exception of the lens holder, the lens flange, obviously that had to be stainless steel. Okay, now just to go to, I touched on this briefly, and I kind of just sort of hand waved over it a little bit, and I'll sort of semi-hand wave over it again this time. So the main modes of shooting, and one of the things that we found, we had the original VariCam and a lot of the other things we brought into this market. You could get into the menus, and I remember I spent many days here, and Jesse did too, I think, going through all the menus, and here's the color matrix, and here's the detail adjustment, and we found that you come back 6 months later, and 99% of those settings are exactly where you left them. And so what we found was that a lot of people, particularly doing production, they wanted to have a couple of looks that they could use, and yes, you can get in there and adjust things if you like, but you're probably not gonna. Your main modes of shooting are going to be your Vlog, V709, and using a 3D LUT. Now, Vlog is like S-Log, or like basically it's our version of the log record mode. Now that works. That's the way raw recording is going to come out. If you want to record in Vlog on the P2 cards using AVC Ultra in 4K or HD, whichever one, then it's going to apply that LUT to it. And and that's really where you're going to get your most dynamic range. And then you have a V709. Now, what that is, we sort of apply our own LUT, our own LUT to get to something that's going to look like it's been through the processes after you've started out with that dynamic range and then done the correction to it. If you've got something that, if you're shooting any kind of episodic TV, you would like to be able to turn the project around quickly. If you are doing the posting yourself on a desktop, you would like to be able to turn the project around quickly. And then, of course, 3D LUTs are something that you can create your own and apply in the system. I think that is something that you may see some particular rental places doing their own look, or you may receive a LUT from your post house that you would then be able to use. So just an idea, and I think this sort of thing has been presented by a lot of manufacturers in a lot of ways. The idea is that if you haven't seen this before, this is what Vlog looks like raw out of the camera, and this is what 709 looks like, which is corrected Vlog, if you don't want to do this yourself. I mean, what we found is that even among one single user, sometimes they're going to want to work like this because production demands it, and sometimes they're going to work like this because the time pressure demands it. Now, you will notice, if you look around on the front of the VariCam 35, there is no gain switch, there is no gain knob, there is no gain setting. Gain is being used in, I would like to say, a clever way to adjust what we're labeling as an ISO setting, which is just keyed to your neutral gray. And what we've been able to do is maintain the same dynamic range for all these different equivalent ISO settings. And now this one over here is what typically happens. And you see what happens when you adjust the gain, and I remember this from a lot of the early days when we were bringing in HD cameras. A lot of guys would say, you know, I like to shoot at -3 dB because it makes the camera quieter and it's sensitive enough, and it's sort of like 400 ASA, which is great for daylight. But the problem is when you reduce the gain, you wind up losing some of the dynamic range, because yes, you've squished the noise down, but in so doing, you've kind of crushed the whole range of the light levels. And the same on the high end, you wind up, when you go to higher gain, you wind up clipping and introducing more noise. So we're able to do this, although at the very highest level. And by the way, this is ridiculous in terms of how light sensitive it is. You really should. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you want to do a documentary about the next blackout, I mean, this might be great. And honestly, at you know, even below this, you can get this to settings where, and Jesse, who was testing it, was saying that he was able to shoot by the light of his cell phone. So I mean, this is really more than you need. I think it's actually silly, but one of the nice things about the low settings is, while we do have an internal ND filter, not everybody likes to use an ND filter. And of course, if I'm shooting outdoors, one of the reasons why I have a large format camera is so that I can have a very shallow depth of field. If I've got to close that iris down, you know, because of the bright sunlight, then I'm losing one of the things I have the camera with. I can go to these low ISO settings, which would be a daylight, you know, like a daylight stock, still maintain the full dynamic range. And there it is. So we tried to make this as intuitive for, you know, to make this really an analog. Well, an analog is an interesting word choice, but an analog for a film camera. So you know, we've got the flange. I mean, we've got the focal plane here. There's your exposure index. And very few buttons, and that again was something that came up again and again. Don't put too many buttons on it. And of course, you know, we got all these features, but we can do this and this, and we want to have more buttons, but nobody wants that many buttons. And so we try to put as few buttons as we could get away with and still get the features everybody wanted. Now, interestingly enough, all the people who said, you know, don't put too many buttons on it, they all wanted millions of connectors on it. They don't have the same opinion of connectors as they do of buttons, by the way. Connectors, yes, connectors, more and more connectors. In fact, they wanted more power connectors. We have built an add-on to this with a whole bunch of extra power taps on it, because, you know, no matter how many of them you have, there's always something else you'd like to plug on here. Now, this, as a 4K camera, one of the very important applications of a 4K camera is to be able to use it for live events. And actually, we're finding whole new markets, because these giant scoreboards that are going up, that once you have the giant LED scoreboard, it will very easily exceed 4K resolution. And other than a rack of servers, there aren't a lot of things you can do to feed that image. And so we're getting a lot of things for scoreboard cameras in 4K. And so it's not elegant. It's not going to be there forever. It's not going to be around forever. But we got to face the fact that right now the universal connection for 4K is for HD SDI. It wasn't our choice. It wasn't anybody's choice. But there's nothing to be done about it, so we got them. I mean, we didn't want to do it. It's expensive to put all 4 of those on there. But they're there. You need them. There's advantages to that. I mean, we actually have a very nice 4K monitor that will take those directly. Also, you can get 4K out of the HDMI, which is, it's a little nicer, but not quite as versatile. But we'll support them. Oh, and also, if you know about level A and level B, the fact that we have both of them will be very good news to you. It's sort of it's one of those, you know, U.S. engineers versus Japanese engineers kind of thing. So we have A and B, and if the people who know about that know that it's great. All right. All right. Operation. Just a couple of things about operation. Of course, one of the big concerns with 4K, one of the things that everybody is afraid of with 4K, very much like HD, am I going to be able to focus it? Might have thought I was in focus, and maybe I was in focus in HD, and then when I see it on a full-size 4K display, I realize I was not in focus. We actually shot a test where somebody was shooting a car coming, and they thought they had it in focus, and it looked great. And then when we got it on a big 4K screen, we realized that the focus, the exact focus point was off by a little bit, and it was the windshield. And so the driver's eyes were not quite in focus, but every single crushed insect on the front of that windshield was in brilliant 4K. So what we've done is we're taking a lot of the things we've done, and of course, getting a 4K monitor, into something this size is damn near impossible. But you can get if you can zoom in on that, you can get the center of the film in a resolution that you can make the best of that monitor to help you focus. Also, we can use electronic means to judge where the focus is, and this is something that we've done in viewfinders in a lot of our cameras. We want to make that available to everybody. And here is some stuff that they've been working on in the back in the lab for quite some time, and it's just been sort of a solution in search of a problem. But that we're able to get localized focus around the frame, which of course, you need to know that I don't want to focus on the windshield, I want to focus on the driver. So this allows us to pick around and say, oh no, this part's in focus, that part's in focus. And I'm going to get more time to play with that. I think Jesse Rosen now has had more time with the camera than I have. Okay, so this is the viewfinder. Had to be a brand new viewfinder, had to be a very, very sharp, and it also had to have very little lag, which of course was something that we've gotten complaints on from ourselves and other manufacturers. And so we went with the OLED panel, 1280 by 720, and I won't give you the secrets of what resolutions of viewfinders are in real life, but trust me when I tell you that is fantastic resolution for a viewfinder because we're actually saying what it is, so that should tell you already that that's good. As you'll notice that very rarely do you see the native resolution of a viewfinder printed out in a brochure. Okay? Oh, and this was something that was asked for years ago at a meeting with a bunch of ASC cinematographers. They wanted to have an overscan. And you realize that, of course, just to get all the pixels that you wanted in 4K, it was already kind of a tall order. But a nice thing that happened in between my initial balsa wood experience at NAB and the final launch of this camera at IBC is the Lumix still camera market just took off. We did really well with it. I know David probably would have preferred if I talked a lot about the GH4. But thanks to that, we had a lot of intellectual property and a lot of investment in our semiconductor imaging factory. And so we were able to make our own imager, and one of the nice things we get about it is a nice little overscan in the viewfinder. Okay, now the viewfinder also has an optical zoom, and remember I said, the resolution of the viewfinder, and the resolution that you can see, of course, is a function of the angular view of your eye, and I know in the display business, people always talk about, what's the angular view of that monitor, how many screen heights am I away? Well, the same holds true for viewfinders. So to be able to make maximum use of the pixel density of that viewfinder, we'd like to be able to zoom in on it just a little bit, so I'm seeing it as sharp as humanly possible. So workflow, and I have 2 minutes left, so of course we can just talk about workflow. Let me just say, I talked about a lot of these different modes, and with things like ProRes and RAW, you wouldn't change your workflow at all. But we feel like the most efficient workflow are going to be when you're using P2 and AVC Ultra. In HD, you can just use a workflow you've been using for a long time. But as you go to 4K and the 444 12-bit in HD, you're going to see more post tools that are going to support that. And do I say exactly who they are? The codecs I talked about already, but here again was something I was speaking about where you can use your color decision list and record in a log. Send a, there we go, just send, say an AVC Intra to drop that onto your editor. You got an old Final Cut Pro 7, drops right in there. And in fact, actually, even the high speed, because if you're recording in high speed, it's still AVC Intra. So if I'm recording 240 frames a second and I'm saving it as 24p, that's just a 24p AVC Intra file. It'll drop in your old editor. But, and then, of course, the proxy's available. The codecs raw goes into the same codecs vault that you're using now, if you happen to be using that. And another thing that we don't talk about the partners here, but they're the in-camera color grading I mentioned before, but it's the same sort of thing, so I'm going to skip over it. Edius Pro 7 will now take the AVC Ultra 4K files, and you can drop them on there. You know, don't try this with a netbook, but you can drop those on Edius Pro 7, and you will be able to just edit the native AVC Ultra 4K files. Support for that is coming from the other vendors. I can never get too specific about their timeline because they don't like it when I do that. But wait, let me skip ahead. And I'll just put this up for a minute and don't take a picture of it. Damn it! All right, all right. And these are a lot of the formats that we're supporting. I'm not going to leave that up again because I'll hear another snap. I have been told that if I'm not the last person to speak, I should put up all my formats and go through all the ones that we record. But I am the last person to speak, so I'm not going to do that because that would definitely put you to sleep. The idea is if there is a particular format that you'd like to shoot with or a workflow that you'd like to support, let me know, and I will tell you if it's going to be possible or impossible. And most likely, it's going to be possible. We've really tried to plan for every eventuality. I'm sure someone will find something to stump us, but there are like 6 dimensions of format now. Whether it's HD or 444 or what data rate. Yeah, exactly. So whatever you're trying to accomplish, I'm sure there will be 7 or 8 ways that you can do it, and that is all I have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for all the presenters who really gave some really good insight tonight. One final thing we do at the very end is hand out plaques to the presenters. So all the presenters could come forward, please. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we can take house lights now if we can get that.
Finally, if anyone has any questions, please ask. Thank you.
Any questions in the audience?
Did Sony get their camera back?
Is it the balsa wood version or the actual camera this time? Thanks for coming, everyone. November 1st is the site visit to the Haunted Hotel at City Tech, and you'll get notices in your electronic mailboxes for that.